Some time passed. It might have been an hour or a day. Dreams brushed against your face and slid away. When you opened your eyes, the light in the room had not changed, and yet the world felt different, as if everything had taken one step back to make space for you to stand up without bumping into anything. You went down the stairs and found that the reader had placed a small loaf of bread on the table near the kitchen window. It was wrapped in cloth and still warm. A little card rested on top in the same delicate hand as the jar labels. It said simply, "Bread for after sleep." You ate. The bread tasted like fields and sun and the clean edge of a knife. You drank the last of the tea, which had cooled to a pleasant warmth, and then you stepped outside into the square. The fog had pulled back a little. The edges of the houses were clearer now. You could see the curve of roof tiles and the seams where planks met and the iron nails that held them. The well waited quiet. The lantern burned. Across the square, a window shone with colored glass. Soft bands of blue and green and amber washed across the cobbles, moving gently like water. You walked toward that light. With each step you felt a little more awake, not the kind of awake that is sharp and hard, but the kind that is clear and steady. The house with the colored glass had a front room that caught the light and spread it across the floor like wine poured carefully. The glass made a pattern of leaves and small birds, and a figure that could have been a woman or a path or a stream. The door was already open. You stepped inside and the light climbed your shirt and then your throat and chin until your whole face felt warmed by it. The room was empty except for a chair near the window and a small table with a bowl of smooth stones. Each stone had a word written on it in careful ink. You bent and read a few. Listen, set down, remember. Begin. You lifted the stone that said begin and felt its weight settle into your palm. You did not know why, but you placed it in your pocket. From the far corner of the room, a voice spoke. It was not the voice from the well and not the voice of the reader. It was a voice that sounded like the color of the light, a voice that knew about rivers and clear mornings. Ask the question you brought with you. You stood in the pool of colored light and let it warm your skin. What have I been carrying that I do not need to carry, you asked. The light deepened. The fog outside pressed close to the glass and then stepped back, as if to give the room more space. You have been carrying the sound of a door closing that never truly closed, said the voice. You have been carrying the last words of a conversation that was not the last. You have been carrying the weight of what you might have said. You do not need to carry that. The door can be left as it is. The conversation can go on in the way the mind allows a soft answer to arrive later. You swallowed. Your throat loosened as if a hand had been gently unfastening a collar. And what have I not carried that would have been light in my hands, you asked. The voice waited, and the waiting felt kind. You have not carried permission. You have not carried the simple right to set your body down and be still. You have not carried the ribbon around your wrist when it asked to be tied. Now you do. You look down. The ribbon around your wrist glowed faintly in the band of colored light. It looked like a small river in summer, moving without effort over smooth stones. Who are you, you asked, and your voice had a little tremor that felt like gratitude. I keep light, said the voice. Others keep chairs and clocks and jars. I keep light. I pass it through glass so that it can become a thing you can feel on your skin. You laughed a small, quiet laugh, not because anything was funny, but because the room had made a little more space for breathing. Outside, the fog shifted. A bell sounded in the distance. It did not ring from a tower. It rang from the far end of the square where an alley bent out of sight. You stepped back from the window. The The colored light slid off your face and arms and lay down on the floor again. You bowed your head, a small thanks to a room that had been kind, and you walked toward the alley. As you reached the edge of the square, the voice from the well rose once more, not to call you back, only to remind you that it was still there. We are ready when you are ready. You turned into the alley where the bell had rung. The air grew cooler, and the stones under your feet felt older, as if many people had passed, and their steps had sunk a little into the surface. A door at the end of the alley stood open onto a courtyard, where vines climbed a wall and small white flowers made a smell like honey and milk. In the center of the courtyard was another lantern, smaller than the first, with a flame that burned steady and blue. Beside it sat a woman on a low stool. Her hair was braided and pinned. Her hands were covered in flour, and there was a bowl at her feet and dough rising under a cloth on the table. She looked up at you, and her eyes made you think of pages that remember what has been written on them. I heard the bell, you said. She nodded. It was time to take the bread from the oven, she said. It was also time for you to arrive. These things happen at once here. She stood and lifted the cloth. The dough had risen as if it were breathing. She smiled at the sight of it as if it were a child asleep. I will wait with you while it bakes, she said. You may ask me something if you like, or you may stand very still and listen to the vines speak to the wall. You listened. The leaves touched the stone with soft sounds, like pages turning in a quiet library. You asked the question that had been standing just behind you since you entered the town. Will I have to leave? She dusted her hands and looked at the blue flame. Everyone leaves. Everyone returns. The town does not keep what does not wish to be kept. The town also does not let go of what is not ready to be let go. The door is a circle here. It is always open and it always leads back to itself. You breathed out. Your breath felt like a small cloud that had been holding rain and had decided to let it fall in a gentle way. The smell of baking rose, warm and clean. Somewhere beyond the wall, a child laughed once, and then the sound faded as if it had been carried off by someone who needed it elsewhere. The woman lifted the bread from the oven that you had not noticed was part of the wall. She set the loaf on the table, and the crust crackled as it cooled, singing a tiny song about heat and air and the way flour remembers water. She broke the loaf and handed you a piece. It was good in a way that made your eyes a little wet. You ate with both hands, careful not to spill crumbs on the blue flame. The woman watched you with a look that carried no judgment at all, only interest, like a field watching a person cross it. When you are ready, she said, go to the door with the small mark near the bottom. Touch the mark with the back of your hand. A room will open. The room will be yours for as long as you need it. It will not keep you, and it will not let you go until you are ready. You looked at the base of the courtyard door and saw a faint shape etched into the wood. It was not a symbol you knew. It looked like a river seen from a hill, a thin curve that moved toward a wide place and then narrowed again. You thanked her. She nodded toward the bread as if to say there would always be more. You stepped to the door and touched the mark with the back of your hand. The wood changed under your skin. It felt warm and alive. The door opened inward into a room filled with the quiet of first light. You crossed the threshold. The town drew one soft breath and then held it, waiting to see what you would do next. The room beyond the door felt like morning, even though you knew it was still night. The light that filled it was not sunlight, but something softer, as if the walls themselves had remembered dawn and were sharing the memory with you. The air was warm and smelled faintly of pine and wet stone, the kind of scent that comes after rain when the earth breathes out. A chair rested in the corner, carved from wood so dark it seemed to drink the glow around it. Against the far wall stood a narrow table, its surface empty except for a bowl of water. The water rippled once, as though something unseen had disturbed it, though the air was still. You stepped closer. The ripples widened and then stilled again, leaving the surface clear and reflective. You expected to see your own face, but instead the water showed you a street. It was not this street. It was not the square you had walked through. It was another place entirely. The stones in the road were pale, cracked by years, and the buildings leaned so closely together that the alley between them looked like a throat. The image flickered like a candle in wind, then steadied. A voice rose, hushed and low, from somewhere near the bowl. "Do you remember this place?" You shook your head. "No, I have never seen it." The voice lingered, drifting like smoke through the room. "You have walked here in dreams, though you do not remember. This is the place where your steps will carry you if you follow the well too far." Your chest tightened at the words. "The well leads here." "Yes," the voice said, "and it waits for you. All wells are connected. All waters remember." You looked again into the bowl. At the end of the narrow street past the leaning houses, you saw a shadow. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it knew you were watching. "Who is that?" you whispered. The voice did not answer immediately. The silence stretched long enough that you thought the question would be left behind unanswered. But then the reply came, gentle and quiet. "That is the one who speaks your name."
The shadow shifted in the water. It had no face you could recognize, only the suggestion of eyes, patient and waiting. It raised one hand as though in greeting. You staggered back from the table, your hand brushing the wood of the chair. The bowl stilled, the street vanished, and only your reflection returned. The voice breathed again. "Do not fear it, it is not your enemy." "Then what is it?" you asked. The silence held for a long moment. Then softly, "It is what you have left behind." Your throat tightened. The ribbon on your wrist seemed heavier than before, as though it too had heard. Before you could speak again, the door behind you creaked open. The fog slipped inside, curling low across the floor. A figure stepped through. It was the reader. His eyes found yours and then moved to the bowl. He said nothing at first. Only after a long silence did he speak, his voice measured. "You saw it?" "Yes," you said. "And it saw you." You nodded, unsure of your own voice. The reader stepped closer, his shoes making no sound on the floorboards. He looked into the bowl, though it now reflected only water. His face did not change, though his eyes seemed older somehow. "It will call again," he said. "When it does, you must decide whether to answer." You swallowed. "And if I do?" The reader glanced at the door, where the fog still lingered, waiting like a patient animal. "If you do," he said, "you will not return the same." The silence that followed was deep and unbroken. The bowl of water remained still. The ribbon on your wrist pulsed faintly with warmth, as if it were listening too. And outside, beyond the door, the fog whispered. The fog pressed against the door like a tide, spilling in around your ankles when you stepped closer. It curled softly, not in a rush, but patient, the way smoke rises from a fire that never burns out. The reader watched it with the calm of someone who had seen it many times before. "You will hear it again," he said quietly. His voice carried no weight of command, only recognition. The fog always speaks twice. You stared at the mist as it spread across the floor, listening for the whisper. At first there was nothing, only the faint hush of your own breathing. Then slowly, like a voice carried from a great distance, the sound returned. Your name, spoken not harshly, not even urgently, but with a tenderness that made the hairs along your arms lift. It was the same voice you had heard at the well. Calm, patient, familiar. "Why does it know me?" you whispered. The reader tilted his head, his eyes on the fog. "Because the fog remembers what you have forgotten." That is its gift and its burden. The words seemed to settle in the air, heavy as stone. You bent down, letting your fingers brush the mist. It was colder than you expected, not damp like ordinary fog, but sharp, almost metallic. As if each wisp carried fragments of memory, shards of voices that had been spoken long ago and were now scattered here. From the mist, a second whisper rose. Not your name this time, but words you had once spoken yourself. "I'll be back soon," your breath caught. The sound was yours, your own voice, but thinner, softer, as if spoken years ago. The reader placed a hand on the back of the chair, steadying himself as though the memory had brushed him as well. "It repeats what we leave behind," he said. "Sometimes promises, sometimes warnings." You swallowed hard. "But I never came back." "I remember," your words trailed into silence. The fog waited, shifting, curling higher, almost to your knees now. From within its depths came another whisper. Not yours this time. Another voice, warm, familiar, a voice that once meant comfort. "Where are you?" You closed your eyes. The sound twisted something deep inside you. It was a question you had never answered. The fog pulsed, breathing in, breathing out. You turned to the reader. "If it remembers, does that mean I could answer? Could I finish what I never said?" His gaze met yours steady. "You could, but the answer may change what waits for you." The bowl on the table rippled again, though no one had touched it. This time the water showed nothing but fog, thick and endless, rolling down streets, slipping through alleys, pressing against doors. You felt it reaching for you, pulling you toward the square, toward the well. The reader spoke once more, his words almost like a prayer. "Go, if you must, but remember the well is not only a place of voices, it is a place of choices." The fog thickened, rising now to your chest, and with it came the faint sound of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, as though someone was waiting in the square. You stepped toward the door. The reader did not stop you, and as you crossed the threshold, the fog swallowed you whole. The fog thickened around you, soft as wool and yet heavy enough that it pressed against your chest. Every breath carried the taste of stone and wet earth. You could not see the houses now. Even the outline of the lantern by the well had blurred into a pale glow, suspended in the mist like a star seen through cloud. The footsteps continued, slow, patient, one after another, circling somewhere just ahead of you in the square. You froze, listening. The rhythm was too steady to be chance, too calm to be running, too deliberate to be a passing echo. "Who's there?" you asked. The fog shifted, curling tighter around your arms. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, from somewhere close by, a voice. Not the whisper from the well, not the echo of your own memory, but something heavier, deeper. You came back. The sound of it pulled the breath from your lungs. It was not loud, but the weight of it pressed into your bones as if the words had been spoken inside you rather than around you. "I don't know this place," you said carefully. "I only followed the lantern." The fog stirred again, parting slightly, and for the first time you saw a shape moving within it. A figure, tall, clothed in shadow, its edges blurred as though the mist itself was unwilling to let it be seen clearly. It did not step closer, but the weight of its presence filled the square. "The lantern does not lead everyone here," it said. "Only those the town remembers." Your pulse quickened, though the heaviness of the fog slowed your movements. "Why would the town remember me?" The figure tilted its head, the faint glow of the lantern glancing across what might have been a face. The fog folded inward again, and with it came another voice, higher, softer, but with the same strange familiarity as the whispers from the well. "You promised." The sound turned your stomach cold. You had heard those words before, long ago, but could not place when or to whom you had said them. The taller figure in the fog spoke again. "The well remembers what you owe." "The fog carries it back to you." You shook your head. "I don't understand. What did I promise?" The figure did not answer. Instead, it raised one hand, and the mist thinned just enough for you to see the stone well again at the center of the square. The rope that hung from its beam swayed as though someone had just pulled it. The sound of dripping water rose louder than before, echoing through the air like a slow heartbeat. The figure's voice came one last time, heavier than before, low enough that the stones beneath your feet seemed to hum with it. If you wish to know, you must listen again. And with that, the fog closed in, the figure dissolved, and only the pale glow of the lantern remained, hovering above the square. The whisper returned, your name, softer now, almost tender. The sound wrapped around you, pulling you closer to the well. And though every part of you longed to turn away, your feet moved forward, step by slow step, until you stood once more at the rim, peering into the endless dark. From below came the faintest sound, not just one voice now, many. A chorus of whispers rising together, all speaking words you could almost, but not quite, understand. The fog leaned close, curling over the stones. And the well waited. The well waited, silent but alive. Its stones were damp beneath your fingertips, slick with moss and cold as though they had been pulled from a riverbed. The rope swayed gently, though no hands pulled it, brushing against the stones with a slow rasp. The whispers below were not one voice now, but many. They rose together in uneven waves, some soft as a sigh, others sharper, quick, nearly breaking through into words you could almost understand. The sound was not chaotic. It moved with a rhythm, as if all of them were breathing in and out together, a chorus bound by something older than language. You leaned closer, though part of you resisted. The mist curled against your cheek as though it had hands. Listen, the voices breathed. The sound grew louder, and in the midst of the murmurs you heard one word clearly. Promise. The same word again, heavier this time. Promise. You swallowed, your throat tight. What promise? What did I make? The fog thickened, pressing harder against your shoulders, as if it wanted to push you down into the well. From the depths, a single voice rose above the others. It was not loud, but it was steady, deliberate, and close enough that it might have been beside you rather than below. You said you would return. The words slid into your bones like ice. The memory surfaced faintly, a night you could not fully recall, the shape of someone standing in the dark, waiting. Your own voice, younger, uncertain, saying, "I'll come back, I swear it." But to who and when? The rope creaked again, louder this time, as though pulled by invisible hands. The bucket at its end scraped against the stones, rising slowly. You stepped back, watching as it climbed, dripping water onto the ground. The pale glow of the lantern reached across the square and caught the rim of the bucket just as it lifted above the well.
The narrow street opened like a secret, its entrance no wider than a doorway. You could have walked past it a dozen times without ever noticing it was there. The fog parted carefully, as if it wanted you to see the way forward, but not too quickly, not all at once. The stones beneath your feet were different here. They were older, uneven, darker, and when you stepped on them, they echoed faintly, as though the ground itself was hollow. The crooked lampposts leaned toward each other across the street, their iron twisted like branches. At the top of each, a lantern burned with a faint, silvery blue flame. They were dim, but together they painted the street in shifting pools of light and shadow. You paused at the first pool of light. A whisper rose from the shadows near the lamppost, soft, close to your ear. "Do you remember the garden?" The sound stopped you cold. The memory pressed faintly at the edges of your mind, a fence, tall grass, the smell of soil on your hands. But the image dissolved before you could hold it. "I don't," you whispered back. The lamppost creaked in the silence. The fog thickened near the ground, curling around your ankles, and then slipped away again as though disappointed. You moved on. The first house on the left had a door painted dark green. Its wood was swollen with damp, its handle rusted. The door stood slightly open, enough that the glow from inside spilled faintly into the street. You placed a hand against the wood. It was warm. From inside came a voice, not a whisper, clear, sharp, cutting through the fog. "Why didn't you answer me?" The sound froze you. It was a voice you almost knew, close enough that it prickled against memory, but too distant to place. "Who are you?" you asked softly. The house was silent. The light inside dimmed, fading to nothing, and the door swung shut with a slow groan. You stepped back. The fog seemed to curl approvingly, as if the street itself had been watching. The second house stood across from the first. Its windows were cracked, its shutters half broken. You leaned closer to the glass. Inside, you saw a room filled with chairs. Dozens of them, all facing the same way, toward a wall you couldn't see. Some were small, some tall, some broken, some untouched. You pressed closer, and then a sound reached you, the faint scrape of a chair leg shifting, though no one was there to move it. And then a whisper from within. "Sit." The word carried no threat, only invitation, but the weight of it made your stomach tight. You turned from the window before you could answer. The chairs creaked once more and then fell silent. The street stretched further ahead. The lamppost flames flickered, bending as though the fog itself was breathing across them. You felt it then, not fear exactly, but the sharp pull of being expected, as though the street had been waiting for you, preparing itself. The next house was taller than the rest, its roof steep and sharp against the dim sky. A balcony jutted outward, and for the briefest moment you saw a figure standing there. It leaned over the railing, unmoving, watching you. Your breath caught. "Hello," you called. The figure did not move. Its shape was blurred by the fog, its edges dissolving like smoke. You blinked and it was gone. The balcony was empty. The silence pressed in, heavy and full. You stepped further down the street, your shoes scraping against the stones. The lamppost flames grew brighter as you walked, until the end of the street glowed faintly, revealing a small courtyard you had not seen before. At its center was a fountain. Water trickled from the mouth of a stone figure, pooling into a basin lined with moss. The sound of it was steady, patient, the first natural sound you had heard in the town besides the drip of the well. You approached slowly. The fountain's water reflected the lamplight, broken into trembling silver shapes. You leaned closer, and once again the reflection shifted. This time it was not a stranger's face. It was your own, but not as you were now. Younger, eyes wider, mouth curved in a smile you had long forgot. The reflection blinked once, then leaned closer to the water. "You shouldn't have left," it said. The voice was yours, but the sound of it sent a chill through your bones. The reflection's mouth moved again, though no sound came this time. Its lips formed words you almost recognized, but the rippling water blurred them into silence. You reached a hand into the fountain, desperate to touch, to steady the reflection, to hold the image still. The water was freezing. Your fingers brushed the surface, and at once the reflection shattered. The water went black. The sound of the trickling stopped, and the street fell silent. The fog closed in again, whispering low, curling around your arms, your throat, your ears. The lamppost flames bent backward, as if something heavy had just exhaled over them. And behind you, from somewhere back in the dark street, a door creaked open. The creak of the door behind you cut through the silence like a blade. You froze, your hand still hovering above the black water of the fountain. The sound lingered in the air, echoing faintly down the narrow street, as though the houses themselves were listening. Slowly, you turned. At first, all you saw was fog, thick and silver, curling around the lampposts. Then the shape of the open doorway emerged. It was the first house you had passed, the one with the dark green door that had closed itself when you tried to listen. Now it stood wide open, the fog spilling out of it like smoke from a fire. A faint glow flickered within, pale and unsteady, as though a lantern burned somewhere deep inside. You hesitated. The reader's words returned to you. Not all promises are meant to be kept here, but the fog pressed close to your back, nudging you, hurting you, whispering with soft insistence. Go in, go in, go in. You stepped carefully toward the house. The green door groaned on its hinges, swinging wider as you approached, though no hand touched it. The glow within pulsed brighter, drawing you forward. The air inside was different, warmer, thicker. The scent of damp earth mixed with something sharper, rust, perhaps, or iron. The floor creaked under your weight as though each board remembered every step ever taken across it. The door closed behind you with a heavy thud. You were not surprised. The room ahead was narrow, its walls lined with shelves that sagged under the weight of glass jars. Some were filled with murky water, others with dried herbs and strange fragments you could not name. The labels had faded to illegibility, their ink smudged into meaningless stains. As you moved further inside, a whisper rose from one of the jars. Here. You stopped, your eyes darting across the shelves. One jar in the middle row trembled slightly, its lid rattling as though something inside was trying to escape. You reached out with trembling fingers and lifted it. The glass was cold, colder than ice. Inside, floating in the cloudy water, was a ribbon, identical to the one tied around your wrist. The whisper rose again, this time clearer, curling from the jar like mist. You left it here. Do you remember? Your hand shook. You looked down at your wrist, the ribbon still glowed faintly there, silver and alive. Yet here it was again, drifting in the jar as though it had been waiting for years. I never, you began, but your voice faltered. The memory pressed at you, dim and broken, a night you could not place, a hand tying the ribbon, a promise spoken in haste. I don't remember leaving this, you whispered. The jar rattled again. The ribbon inside pressed against the glass, twitching as though it longed to reach you. You promised, the voice said. You said you would return. The words struck deep, hollowing your chest. The whispers outside the house swelled, echoing the same word again and again, a chant rising through the fog. Return, return, return. You stumbled backward, nearly dropping the jar. The shelves groaned as if in response, their jars trembling, rattling, whispering. Stay with us. Finish it. Keep your word. The air thickened, pressing against your lungs. You set the jar back on the shelf with shaking hands, and at once the voices hushed, though the ribbon inside still drifted toward the glass, watching. From deeper in the house came the sound of footsteps, slow, careful. You froze, your breath caught in your throat. The footsteps stopped just beyond the doorway at the far end of the room. For a long moment, the silence was complete. Then a voice spoke, not a whisper, not an echo, a clear human voice. You came back. The words cut into you, low and steady, spoken not as surprise, but as certainty. The doorway remained dark, the figure unseen. Your mouth was dry, but you forced the words out. Who are you? The silence stretched. Then the voice answered, calm and close, as though it had been waiting all along. The one who never left. The fog inside the house stirred, curling upward like smoke, and the doorway seemed to deepen, growing darker, as if it led not to another room, but into something endless. The figure stepped forward, and the light from the lantern flickered,